Mr. Jay Himes. Jay is the Executive Director of PASBO, which is the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials. I want to thank Jay for his perseverance in trying to make it here to Erie. I think this is the third scheduled meeting we've had. We finally got him up here, so we appreciate him taking the time to come up and talk a little bit. I had asked Jay to come and give a sort of an orientation to our board, but obviously for the members of the audience as well. I've had the privilege of hearing Jay speak a couple of times. He brings a wealth of experience and very down-to-earth approach, and his message is something that is very pertinent for us as we begin to figure out how we're going to make this budget work. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Jay Himes. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate it. Thanks for the beautiful day to drive from Harrisburg. It was nice to drive to Erie in sunlight in March. I'm going to spend my time trying to sort through some basics of school finance. It's incredibly complicated. I'll try not to speak in accounting jargon. I'm not an accountant, but it's a very complicated subject, and your time spent tonight trying to understand this in some perspective, I would applaud. I'm not going to advocate for anything in particular, other than to have you have a better understanding of this complex school finance system we have, and to share with you some data that we collect for our members. We are a statewide association. We're out of Harrisburg. We have about 2,000 school employees. I've been in this position for 20 years, and what our organization in Harrisburg tries to do is help our members, like Aaron, non-instructional administrators in school finance and operations, just do their job better so they can serve the district and the administration better. So, one broad overview in terms of the statement of how schools are funded in Pennsylvania, what the district component is, what the state component is, and what the federal component is that we just have a lousy school funding system. It's broken, it's inconsistent, it has wide disparities between districts. We have no rhyme or reason to annual funding decisions made by the General Assembly at this point. And we'll talk a little bit about the formula later. And we have a lot of inconsistencies from county to county, some based upon the outdated and inadequate reassessment system for properties. Okay, so we have a big system in Pennsylvania. We have 3,288 school buildings in the 500 school districts. In total, we have more than 700 local education agencies. So 500 districts, we have 176 charter schools, and more are opening. We have something called intermediate units, which are regional service providers. So when that's all said and done, we are up to 700 plus educational systems throughout Pennsylvania. Tonight, we're going to talk about school districts, not any of the other units you just saw on that slide. So if we look at what an average school district would be, it's about 3,200 kids. So you're more than twice as large as the average school district in terms of enrollment in Pennsylvania. If you look out there on the far right side of that screen, you'll see all the single units. Those are many of the larger districts, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, some of the suburban Bucks County districts outside of Philadelphia, etc. But again, this shows you the distribution of what an average school district would look like. So, some relevance in terms of your school system. So you are about 7,200, so again, more than twice as large as the average school district. That would actually rank you about 40 or 41st in terms of district size in something in this slide called average daily membership, which again is good state accounting jargon for how we measure students, actually. If you look at some of the other specific district factors, sometimes related to enrollment, sometimes related to others. factors, you spend on average about $12,100 per those students enrolled in your school district. Something called expenditures per average daily membership. How much do you spend divided by the number of students as measured by average daily enrollment. And that 12,000 puts you pretty far down the list at 464th if you're looking at it on a statewide basis. All right, now speaking of taxes, let's go to how you raise revenues, not only in your school district, but school districts across the state. So you'll see that this is 13-14 data, so it's not up to date. It's the most reasonable or most recent data available. It's almost $15 billion get raised locally to fund schools in Pennsylvania. Most of that, as you'll see, comes from right here, which is real estate taxes. And that's because in Pennsylvania we had a 50-year-old system of what tax sources are available to districts. So we have a small income tax. Not even 100% of the school districts in Pennsylvania levy that income tax, but most do. We have something called the real estate transfer tax. That's a tax on the sale of real estate. It's split between the state, school districts, and municipalities. And then a lot of other very small taxes, sometimes affectionately known as nuisance taxes. They tend to be per capita or head taxes. And once upon a time, we had a lot of other tax options, but mostly they've been dwindled away by legislative action in Harrisburg. So your menu pretty much ends up to be property tax, a little bit of income tax, and a little bit of other things thrown in. If we look at where you rank, 70%, about 70% of your revenue comes from local sources. So you're heavily relying upon local taxpayers for a large chunk of your money. You rank 126th in that regard statewide. So what that means is there's 125 districts that actually get more in terms of local resources, but you are at a point where 375 districts are getting less from their local resources. And what that usually translates to is the fact that those districts get more state aid than you do. So this is clearly a seesaw. As more state aid comes in, local revenues can go down because you have more state aid to rely on. When you don't get state aid, your local resources generally have to go up to compensate. And that's pretty much how it works. If you see this chart, this will show you, again, where the state revenues are. So again, $26 billion total enterprise across the state, all school districts, all revenues and expenses. 9+ comes from state resources, that other 15 or 16 comes from local resources. All right, now, if you look at this bar, you'll see of the total, this is more than half right here, something called Basic Education Funding, BEF. And that's what this whole fight is about in Harrisburg right now. The governor blue line, the BEF appropriation, and you are living off 45% of last year's dollar amounts that you got in BEF. It is obviously the single largest line item in the PD budget. In fact, it is the single largest line item in the entire state budget. And that's what the big fight is in Harrisburg right there. Okay, so we looked at revenues from the state side, revenues from the local side. Again, you are a typical community in terms of high local resources, meaning lower state resources. But let's take a look in that configuration where your dollars go. In the accounting jargon and the accounting manual, you'll see that this instruction, so this is money into the classroom to pay teachers primarily. You'll see that's broken down by regular education, special education, and vocational education across there. So most of the dollars go into instructional support, which is teachers and other assistants for instructional programs. Support services are 27%, and then non-instructional programs 1.7%. On the far right side of the slide,